for next Sunday. Now, I want to invite Sarah House up, who is our Director of Operations, and she's going to tell you about some really important movement that's happening online. So this is Sarah. Can you give Sarah a hand? Hold on.
The other day, someone asked me, what do you do? I'm like, well, I do a lot of things. But now I get to show you one thing I have been working on. Greg's going to take us on a little tour. So we don't have the, let's just call it budget or capacity to do the full website redo right now. But what we can do, and what I have done, is I've reorganized everything behind the scenes. So it's finding information is my goal, and helping others who are first visiting us to know who we are quickly and easily without getting lost. We had a lot of duplicates of information. So I just wanted to give you a quick tour and point out what is refreshed, what's new, and give you a little preview of our new church app. So if you visit our website, is there any way you can zoom in, Greg, or is that asking too much of our system? So now we have a visit tab. Oh, see, that's the problem. Now we have a visit tab. So for those who you're inviting friends, family, neighbors to come join you, it's a real quick, easy one-stop shop. Who we are, plan your visit, and for those who want to bring family, young ones, I made sure that children and youth are there front and center, so they know what to expect. Under our About Us, a lot of the same things that were scattered around before, we're just connected under here. So if you want to learn more about how we worship, pray, baptism, journey, all that's hiding there under our vision and values. Now, our community and justice section, it's a little combined. So this is everything that happens outside of our property. So our partnerships with local organizations, our partnership with IPALA in Guatemala, all that is connected there under community and justice. And now, sermons and resources. Who of you used to have trouble finding discussion questions? Okay, so it wasn't just me. I combined them now. All right, we're not going to even have a separate page with just discussion questions. No point, okay? I don't want to upload and refresh 6 different web pages every week. So now it's under current series and discussion questions. For those who want a little more information about the series, sometimes Matthew gives me 6 pages and sometimes it's 1 paragraph. It will all be here for you. And then like today we have it uploaded there. So Sunday, May 24th, discussion questions. And as always, although I might need to go refresh the button and fix it, if you scan the QR code on the back of your chairs, it takes you to our announcements page, which is hiding under Connect. So the very first thing is announcements. And so again, you'll have discussion questions, but that's just going to bump you to that same other page. And then everything that's on the weekly flyer, I keep updating here. So as stuff changes, this changes. So just know if you go, let's scroll back up, Greg. Love Greg, he is awesome. We all can't sing his praises enough. Yeah. So under that Connect, now we've got our announcements, the Connect card, and the new Church Center app, which also is linked at the top. So what we're going to ask you to do is just know we're not ready for the entire migration, etc. This is a process. It's piece by piece. Thank you to volunteers who are already getting online, giving us feedback, trying to help us work through the kinks of, okay, well, how can we get all the calendar issues resolved for signing up to help for coffee or for greeting or the other jobs we have. So our goal is that as we continue to have more people engaged with the app, I have a form for feedback so that you immediately know, okay, this isn't working, Sarah, you got to fix it right now. Then I know. Also, you can always email info, and I get those emails and I try to address them as soon as possible. So now, who of you would use the old login on the website? Okay, maybe like 25, 30%. Okay, did you like it? Okay, there's like no hands up. Fair. Our goal is that you're going to be able to use the app on your phone to get any piece of information you want. And it's got a lot of modules in it, so we're slowly connecting and figuring out how it works. One thing I have gotten up and running, Greg, if you'll go to the login. So what you'll see here is the new login area. What will happen is there's no setting up a username and password, okay? So each time it's a two-factor authentication. We've got another layer of security, which is nice. So it'll text you or email you a code every time. And just be prepared for that, all right? Because I know that can be a little daunting at times. And here we will have direct access to our calendar. The directory I got to work on, because those who are already on the system, you can't see them. So I'm going to figure out how to make sure that everyone's visible. And then our Give is now live and running. Not sure you can see it without logging in though. But you can even give without logging in at this point. So the nice thing is I have some wonderful beta testers who are working with me right now on making sure that we are securely moving over our giving from the old system to the new one. So let's pull up that next slide, Greg. And just because I need timelines or things don't get done, we have to have this completed by June 21st. Okay, so I'm putting that in everyone's mind that if you had engaged with the old system in any way, if you had recurring gifts set up, if that was your go-to of, hey, you know, it's the time for making sure solar panels are purchased for Guatemala, all that, we're going to get it up in the new system. And we're going to be done by January 21st, or June 21st, pardon me. Timeline's important. And then the old system is deactivated. It's gone, okay? Now, Greg, if you'll go back to the live again. For those of you who are worried about, what about my giving statements at the end of the year? What about the fact that we're trying to do two systems in one calendar year for taxes? I gotcha, all right? I've already downloaded all the information. I will do that yet again before we fully deactivate. The new church center will have all of your donations recorded for the entire fiscal and calendar year for your taxes. So your giving statement won't have to be in two pieces. I gotcha. Now, Greg, scroll all the way to the bottom. For those who don't trust me, it's okay. Trust but verify. Old login will live here until it is fully deactivated on June 21st. So if you would like to go access your information, if you would like to get your giving statement on your own, that's totally fine. I am not going to remove your access in any way. What I do want to ask you to do is please delete the old app, okay? So if you have it on your phone, if you have it bookmarked and you don't need to use it again, delete it. And that's just going to make life so much easier. And then when you follow it, well, we'll have more information next week. We'll have you all download them together and we'll be ready to go. I will be available in the lobby after service today, especially for the beta testers who are helping me with transferring giving. If you have questions and follow-up, I gratefully appreciate all of the feedback. It's very helpful. So thank you for the time, but good information to have.
Thank you, Sarah. So blessed just for the way Sarah's brain works. It's lovely and beautiful. So thank you for all of that. You know, I don't know about you, but in seasons of plenty and then want, I feel like God has given us so much. Even if sometimes that so much is just a sense of peace or a sense of connectedness or a sense of centeredness, whatever that is. And because God has given us so much, I know for me personally, a way to connect to the work of God is just to be generous. If that's generous with my presence, generous with my time, generous with my money, generous with my prayers, whatever it is, to be able to take all that God has given us and do that. And know that as we are looking at this system that Sarah walked you through, and we'll continue to do this. This won't be the only day that you'll hear about this. Don't worry. We'll continue to walk you through this. We really want to be really good stewards of all that God has given us. And so that's why we're doing what we're doing. So, yeah. So what we're going to do now is, for those of you that have littles or kids, we're going to let you go. Bye. We're going to let you go. You can take your kids off this way to the left or my left. Bye, everybody. Aw. And let everybody go. And now, why don't we take some time here in the auditorium and just find somebody around you and say hello or shake a hand. Don't cough on that hand if you're sick. Just kind of elbow people. But let's take some time to meet and greet.
Okay. Welcome again, everybody. I'm Matthew. I'm the lead pastor here. I'm going to be speaking for a little bit. We're actually starting a new series today called Stories That Draw Us Deeper. It's a series on the parables. These are the usually short, not always, but usually pretty short stories that Jesus told that are sort of cryptic and mysterious, have layers of meaning, and are supposed to help us understand what he's saying better. Although, I don't know whether it always works out quite like that, as we're going to see in this particular parable. We're going to look, to kick this story, this series off, we're going to look at the first parable that Jesus tells. It's the first one anyway in Matthew's Gospel and Mark's Gospel, not the first one in Luke's Gospel. They all, the Gospels sort of rearrange material in different ways. But this is from chapter 13 of Matthew's Gospel. So it takes Jesus a few chapters to get warmed up, and then he kicks in with his parables in chapter 13. And Kevin and Gina are going to come and read for us what is perhaps one of Jesus' most famous parables. It's the parable of the sower. Over to you.
That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places, where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop. 100, 60, or 30 times was sown. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear.
The disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whosoever has will be given more, and they would have an abundance. Whosoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become callous. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, because they see, and your ears, because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it.
Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word, at once receives it with joy. But once they have not root, they last only a short time. When troubles or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. So this is the first parable that Jesus tells in Matthew's account, in Matthew's gospel. It's actually a parable. It's somewhat rare in some sense because it appears in all three synoptic gospels. So there are no parables in John's gospel, just in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And it appears in each of those. And there's only a couple of other parables like that. We'll talk about one of them next week as well. So it's an important parable. Very memorable, obviously, because all the writers include it. It's pretty famous. I think a lot of people have heard of the parable of the sower. Lots of books have been written about it and based on its theme. And it's a pretty cool parable, I think, in many respects. It's split up. This passage is split up into three parts, and Kevin and Gina read those different three parts together. Starts off with the parable. So we hear the parable. And then Jesus talks about, understanding. So I think in many respects, the sort of turning point in this parable is at the end of the parable, in that first section. Whoever has ears, let them hear. And Jesus here is getting at hearing, seeing, as sort of general senses. He uses the term also understanding. We'll explore that term a little bit in a moment. So it's really about how do we understand what's being told to us, and what is being told to us, as Matthew puts it here, the message of the kingdom. The actual word there is in the Greek is logos. It's the word. So sometimes it says message of the kingdom, sometimes it says the word, and it's the term logos, which has a lot of I was going to say imbued meaning, but I'm trying not to use that word so much. But it's full of meaning. It's brimming with meaning, that word logos. We'll come back to that in a moment. But the point is understanding. So that's the first part. He tells this parable. And the parable is meant to, we're sort of led to believe parables help us understand. And yet the middle section is all about the fact that they don't understand. Right? They don't get it. And Jesus has to sort of dig a bit into what understanding looks like and what the struggle about understanding. And even then, in the third section, he has to explain the parable, right? So that's what we've got. That's what we're dealing with here. So this issue of not understanding is brought out by the disciples saying, why do you speak in parables? In Mark and Luke's account, it's way more explicit that they don't get what Jesus is talking about. They've heard this parable. They clearly don't get it. In Matthew, they just say, why do you always talk in parables? Like, in other words, we don't really want to let on that we're confused, but we're confused. Whereas in Mark, they clearly don't understand. And Jesus says, if you can't understand this parable, how are you going to understand any of them? Because this is kind of a parable about parables. So we've said already, parables are these very layered, complex, stories that have layers of meaning, that have cryptic meaning. And this is one of those, because it's a parable about parables. There's lots of irony in it. Jesus is talking about understanding, right? It's a parable about understanding. So it's about understanding, if you get what I mean. And they clearly don't understand. So Jesus says this to them when they ask that question, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, that word secrets is mysteries, the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has been given more, whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. There's that word understanding. So this sounds terribly unfair, right? I mean, it doesn't sound like if I was saying that kind of thing, I think you'd think, well, that's a bit over the top. That's a bit caustic. That's a bit unkind. But I don't think it is really, because here's Jesus saying, okay, you have been given the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. In other words, you're insiders with secret knowledge, inside knowledge, and clearly they don't get it. It's ironic, right? There's irony there. So it's a level playing field one way or the other. And then Jesus talks about, those who have will be given more, and those who don't have will have what they have taken away from them. What Jesus seems to be getting at here is to understand what he's talking about. You kind of have to lean in. You have to be open. The soils kind of illustrate that. You have to be soft-hearted in some way, innocent maybe even, not callous, not hard-hearted. So you have to kind of be making active efforts in order to hear and receive what's being shared with us. So in other words, if you have that, you'll get more. If you have a soft heart, if you have an open heart, you'll get more. If you're on the back foot thinking, prove it to me, go on, just show me, then you're less likely to get it. And actually, you'll lose something. So Jesus seems to be calling us to lean in, calling us to be soft-hearted. And he goes on to talk about or refer to a prophecy in Isaiah chapter 6. And we'll come back to this in a minute because it's significant. But here's what he says. You will be ever hearing but never understanding. You will be ever seeing but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts, and I would and turn and I would heal them. That's a quote from Isaiah chapter 6, right? So Jesus is quoting Isaiah to illustrate his point about how we need to lean in, how we need to be open-hearted, tender-hearted in order to receive this message of the kingdom. And I think Jesus is implying that this message of the kingdom, what he's teaching about, what he's living, is kind of when we say it's hidden, it's not like it's been hidden away from people deliberately. It's counterintuitive. I think we sometimes miss that now because we're so used to the teachings of Jesus. But if you think about it, it's somewhat counterintuitive to think that you should love your enemies. Right? It doesn't, at one level, that does not make sense. And we know it doesn't make sense because we really find it hard to do it. We get it up here because Jesus taught it. But we default to hating our enemies as quick as anything, don't we? I mean, that's just, it's a human tendency. Or it's counterintuitive to think the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Right? To put ourselves last, to defer to other people. In one sense, that doesn't sound like the way to get ahead in life. To live a fruitful, productive kind of life, the kind of life that evolves out of the healthy soil, using this analogy that Jesus uses of agriculture. So in other words, these are sort of complex in that they're not necessarily intuitive. They're not necessarily all that obvious. Not complex in that only rocket scientists can understand them, right? In fact, Jesus might be implying that the less baggage you have, the more innocent you are, the more open-hearted you are, the more likely you are to see these mysteries and experience these mysteries and understand them. Okay, so let's think about the parable. Jesus tells the parable and then explains the parable. So it should be all pretty plain sailing for us, right? Not necessarily. Jesus seems to be saying, because he interprets the parable for us, we are the soil. Right? Or the soil is our human condition. The soil is our heart. And he talks about different kinds of soils. There's the hard soil. So he says, as the soil was scattering the seed, some fell along the path and the birds came and ate it up. Right? So we think about pathways in fields, and we can think here of probably in the day back there would have been public pathways through areas where crops were grown. And we all know that if you walk a pathway enough and enough people walk it, it forms a bare, hard patch, which is kind of handy, except you can't really grow anything on it. It's just the soil's too impacted. So he draws the analogy. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom, the logos, that's translated message of the kingdom here, and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in the heart. This is the seed sown along that path. So we could think here of our own lives, and think of what are the sort of well-trodden paths of our own life, our sort of habitual ways of thinking, or our habitual ways of responding and behaving, certain behaviors, habits, addictions that kind of just become entrenched in our lives, certain ways of thinking that become entrenched in our lives, certain algorithms, right, that just, okay, I see certain people this way and other people this way, like those ones, dislike these ones. I see myself a certain way because people have, they have their algorithms and they respond to me in a certain way. So, you think about hard and fast patterns that might actually, even though they can be useful, like a shortcut through a field, aren't necessarily very healthy, necessarily. So that might be that might be a conclusion we can draw or an application we can make. And in the discussion questions this week, there's a question simply says, look at all these soil types and what do you make of them and how might they apply into your own life? Then there's the rocky soil. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up because the soil was shallow. Some translations say gravelly. And it's incredible, isn't it? Where, like, I have some gravel on a driveway at home. It's amazing what can grow on that thing. Incredible. So I think we can all relate to these analogies actually pretty well. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. I wish some of the things growing on my driveway would wither, but they obviously have some kind of root, I guess. So here's the explanation or the interpretation. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word, the logos, and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. And I think we can relate to this. How maybe we're impatient. We don't persevere. Have a think about this. I'm thinking right now, the number of times I determine in my heart to improve my own spiritual journey, my own spiritual practice. And it might even not have super spiritual connotations. It might be just, completing my to-do list, or having a to-do list, and making sure that I take rest, etc., etc. And then within a couple of weeks, I'm back to square one again, right? Because I don't have that perseverance. There's this sort of shallowness to that decision making. I think we can all relate to that to some degree, right? And again, there's a question in the discussion questions this week where we can explore that a little bit. Then Jesus talks about thorny soil. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. It's such a graphic image, isn't it? And we can think about, you go for a walk on our property, or maybe if you have a yard, go and walk around the yard. We're constantly in competition with other plants that are choking our flowers or our trees. When we did the day of service, the Inside Out day of service a few weeks ago, we freed a lot of our trees from these suffocating invasive vines that can eventually pull the whole tree down. So I think these images, we can relate to them. And the seed falling among the thorns refers to someone, this is the interpretation, who hears the word, but worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. And I think that choking sense, for me, I think of, I do have a lot of worries about life. Probably by world standards, I'm wealthy, but by more local standards, I don't feel particularly wealthy. So I could do with a bit more of that choking, a bit more wealth to choke me out. but I have a load of other things that are choking me out, right? Just, too much going on in my life, overcommitment. I'm a expert at that, filling my life up with too many things because they all look so good and they all seem so important. And I also, there's demands on me. We all have demands, don't we? And we don't want to disappoint people. And then it's like our identity gets wrapped up with all that, and we're choked and we're suffocated. So there's a discussion question about this one in the discussion questions this week. We can explore that a little bit. And then there's the good soil. The good soil. What's the good soil like? Well, Jesus doesn't even talk about it. He doesn't describe it. That's the irony, or another piece of irony. The assumption is it's soil without thorns, rocks, and that's soft and not hard, right? I guess that's the implication. Still, other seed fell on good soil where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. So the outcome's variable, but it's a good outcome. And that the interpretation there is the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. Understands it. The term there, the Greek word is suniemi, which means put together or sent together. It's sort of got a dynamism about it. This sense of understanding is, I guess we have an English expression for that, don't we? Like put two and two together. It assumes you've understood something. It's maybe not quite the same, but this idea of soil and seed coming together and incubating, the soil incubates the seed and something beautiful happens out of that because it's received by the soil. The soil is receptive and tender. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. So there's the explanation. So we're done, really, because Jesus explained it for us. But I'm only about 15 minutes in, so it's going to go on longer, right? You just know it. So what's going on here? Because, why don't they get it? Why don't they get it? Well, we're at an unfair advantage because we've had a few thousand years or a couple of thousand years to, hear this story and hear Jesus' interpretation. But at one level, that's all fairly obvious, I think. Maybe the parables are obvious, and actually parables are just ways of telling obvious truth. But that sort of goes against what Jesus is saying about, hey, these are tricky things. You got to lean in. You have to. There's a using all your senses and all your faculties to be receptive of what's going on here. So let's think about this a little more. Okay, maybe there's more than one way to hear this parable. Okay, Jesus has told us what the parable means, but I've also alluded to, I think there's a lot of irony in this parable because it's a parable about parables. It's a parable about understanding. So it's layered. So some ways to hear this parable are, we are the soil, right? We are the soil. And we need to receive the good news. So I'm using another term here, good news, which is usually the translation of the Greek word for gospel. It's not used here. I'm just meaning it. It's the message of the kingdom. It's the logos. It's the message. It's what Jesus, if you think about it, it's perhaps the body of teaching of Jesus, the way of Jesus. It's more than just words, more than just language. It's the essence of what Jesus is about, right? And Jesus uses that term, the kingdom of God. But we'll call it the good news for now. So we are the soil. In other words, we need to receive the good news. The good news, the seed is the logos. That's spelled out for us. And we need to receive the good news. That's one way of looking at it. I think there's another way of looking at this, which is that actually we are the seed. We are the seed. And let me explain why I wonder if this is another interpretation. So actually, Jesus starts out, I think, implying that he is the seed. That he is the seed. Do you remember in the passage that Kevin and Gina read, Jesus says to them in that middle section where he's talking about, you don't understand. Here's why you don't understand. Here's why understanding of these counterintuitive things is somewhat tricky. He says, but blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. But truly, I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. And again, we're saying here with seeing and hearing, Jesus is talking about suniemi, understanding, right? So Jesus is saying that, he's already talked to them about the secrets of the kingdom being revealed to you. So it's almost like, well, you don't really need parables. But he's actually saying to them, I'm with you. I think Jesus is implying here what you see and what you hear is me. It's the life of Jesus, the presence of Christ in their lives. That's what is giving them understanding. That's the greatest gift he can give them, is his presence living out this life in front of them. And that's what, and everybody else, he needs to teach them and talk to them. And so he uses parables because that's the best way he's got, in Jesus' view, I think, of helping them understand these counterintuitive things. So Jesus is saying, I am the seed, I think, here. And when he quotes Isaiah, in that we read that quote from Isaiah 6, if we look at the preceding part to that quote, so if we look at the beginning of chapter 6, the prophet Isaiah is talking about being called by God to be this prophet in 8th century Israel, 8th century Judah, actually, the southern kingdom. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom should I send? Who will go for us? Then I said, here am I, send me. He said, go and tell these people, you hear, but do not understand. You look, but do not see. That quote that Jesus then goes on to complete. So the context of that quote is Isaiah being sent to be the message, to open eyes and open ears and bring understanding to the people. And so Jesus is, I think, implying, I am this sent one. I am the sent one, not just my words, but I am the sent one, like a seed scattered. And interestingly, if you read on in that chapter 6 of Isaiah, it ends with, is quite a condemning passage, actually, talking about people who just don't, who are callous, have calloused hearts and hard hearts. But then and that trouble's going to come. And then it talks about there being, this tree will be cut down. That's the analogy. There's an agricultural metaphor there. But it will remain a seed for the future, a seed of this, of a renewed life that God is dreaming of. And if you go to the chapter before Isaiah 6, which, as we all know, is Isaiah chapter 5, right? As good biblical scholars, we know that. But in chapter 5, there's like a parable, actually, a parable of a vineyard. And Jesus actually uses this parable himself, he kind of borrows it from one of his own parables. But there's a parable of the vineyard in Isaiah chapter 5, which is all about God coming and looking and hearing and listening. And it says God has sown this beautiful vineyard, created this beautiful vineyard, which is an analogy for the people of Israel, and looks for justice, but sees oppression, and listens for righteousness, but hears the cries of violence. So Jesus seems to be alluding to, in a context where this life is absent, right, where the seed isn't growing, he is the one sent to be the seed. And he is the logos, you could say, right? Because that's how Jesus is presented to us. So this thinking is saturates the early followers of Jesus thinking themselves and their writing. So we are familiar, for instance, in John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, in the beginning was the Logos. Okay, and the Logos is this very grandiose term for the Greek concept of the ultimate reality in the universe. It's kind of like life itself, if you like. It's very hard to define, but the Christian writers said that's Jesus of Nazareth who embodies that. Jesus of Nazareth, this human being, is the embodiment of this Logos. The Word became flesh and lived among us. So this is sort of very familiar thinking in terms of how the early church began to think about Jesus. I love the Message's translation about this. The word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. Okay, so there's this sense of sentness, of scatteredness, of a seed, if you like, coming into an environment and germinating. Okay, so we're talking about Jesus at this point. Jesus is maybe saying, I am the seed. So in other words, Jesus has a problem, because only some people really experience everything about him as that seed. And with others, he has to communicate it. So those people who are with him are at an unfair advantage. They experience the incarnation of this message lived out. Whereas if we're just talking to a crowd, Jesus has got to find other means to do this, parables, to try and, like, it's kind of like this and it's kind of like that, and it's a little bit like the other. So he's talking about the struggle of this. Now, in Luke's gospel, when Luke tells this parable, Luke adds something in. Mark adds the same thing in. Matthew chooses to leave it out, but Luke adds something in. So first of all, Luke says, this is the meaning of the parable. The seed is the word of God. Okay, so we're all good. It's the same thing. It's the logos. But then he goes on to say, but the seed on good soil. So this is the explanation about the good soil at the end. The seed on the good soil stands for those with a noble and good heart, who hear the word, retain it, and by persevering produce a crop. So there's that, emphasis on persevering. But okay, so far so good. So far pretty much the same as Matthew. Then Luke adds this in: no one lights a lamp and hides it in a clay jar or puts it under a bed. Instead, they put it on a stand, so that those who come in can see the light. So Luke seems to be implying Jesus is saying, you're the seed, because you are the light, you are the message, you are the logos. Your life, if you've received the good news, your life becomes the good news. You can live this out. And interesting that Matthew doesn't include this part, because actually, this may sound familiar, because Matthew does include it, but somewhere completely else in the account, actually at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And we've talked about this recently. The way Matthew puts this is not associated with this parable, but it's the same language. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. All right, so I think Jesus might be saying that we are the seed, right? So we can be the good news. We can be the good news. If we can receive the good news, that means we can we put the soil of our lives and the logos come together and germinate something beautiful, and then we can actually be the good news because that light starts shining out from us. So now, Mark, I told you this parable is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So Mark adds something in a little different too. That piece we just heard is there, but Mark kind of tells another parable right at the end of this, and it's sort of a parable that appears in the same place in Matthew and Luke, but it's a different parable. And actually, the one in Matthew, Nikki will be talking about that in a couple of weeks' time. But Mark kind of tells the same parable, but it's a little changed. Here's what he says. He also said, the kingdom of heaven is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow. He does not know how. Okay, so this is after this parable of the sower. It's kind of like a reboot, similar kind of parable, but different. The earth produces of itself first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. But when the grain is ripe, at once he goes in with his sickle, because the harvest has come. So here Jesus seems to be implying, I think, that perhaps we are the sower, right? So he talks about sowing and the mystery of sowing. We don't know, seeds get scattered, and he doesn't talk about good soil, bad soil, and all that. He just says that some stuff grows. Stuff just mysteriously grows. And, we understand a lot about this now scientifically, but there's so much about that we don't get. Like, I've planted things in my garden and they just don't grow. or just don't bear fruit, and then other ones just sort of spring up, and it's like, whoa, that's just amazing. So there's a whole bunch that we don't really understand about this still. So in other words, as people who receive the good news and embody and be the good news, we also can be people who share the good news, right? And perhaps we can't be the good news unless we receive it first. Perhaps we can't or shouldn't share the good news unless we're actually being the good news. And I think this is very empowering for us, actually, because if we think about it, we have a messaging problem, don't we? We think about, if we were in Jesus' shoes now, which we kind of are, by the way, we would be struggling, because we do struggle, to think, what do we say to people? If we think we've got something worth hearing, something worth living, we have a logos that's beautiful. It's about love and kindness and justice and peace and reconciliation and forgiveness. If we think we've got something really beautiful, we are doing a terrible job of talking about it, right? And we all get that we're doing a terrible job of talking about it. We've been doing a terrible job probably for about, I don't know, 1600 years, I think, probably since Constantine. And before that, it was, give and take. But, our message has become colonialism, right? I mean, if you think about the message of Christianity through the centuries, I mean, we wouldn't like to associate ourselves with that, but, it's become enforced on people. Once colonialism burns out, is unsustainable, it becomes nationalism, right? Just preserve ourselves, don't forget about taking over the world. We're just going to, us for us. It's been manipulative. We've used hatred. We've used fear. Go to hell unless you love Jesus, you follow Jesus. I mean, our messaging has not been great. The good news is that maybe we don't need some fancy pants message. Maybe our sign outside on the roadways out there. I drive past our church and I think, God, what would be a really cool sign to put up that would just really capture everybody's attention? They would just think, I really want to go to that church. I don't think we've got a sign like that, right? So the good news is we don't have to come up with a incredible, clever message. Like, I think Jesus is saying, parables are great, but they don't really do it. Be the message. The good news is that anybody can be the message, right? We can be the message. The bad news is that we have to be the message, because that's just so freaking challenging and difficult, right? It's so hard. And who would want to say to somebody, you know what? Do you want to see what Jesus looks like? Look at me, right? I can think of certain people that I know who I might point to. I would not be pointing to myself. Even in all my lack of self-awareness, I know myself enough to know, don't point at me. So it's good news, but it's challenging news. But I think that's what Jesus is implying here. He's saying to the disciples, look, you've got the real thing here, and you can be the real thing. That's so much more powerful than words. And that's why Christianity over the centuries has, let's face it, largely abysmally failed, because it's all been about words and actions that do not match those words. Things can change. Things can change. So I wonder if this is what Jesus is talking about, and that we are the message, and that we are scattered. And I'm going to try and speed up here and just wrap this piece up, because our vision gets at this, right? Imagine that community scattered throughout the region, working as agents of love, peace, and hope wherever they are. We're conscious of being a scattered community. We're gathered at the moment. What if our whole ethos was like an in-breath and an out-breath? Here we are gathered, and we gather together. And there's certain things we do when we gather together. We worship, we pray, we get empowered, we encourage one another, we have potlucks, we farm together, we celebrate together, we look after one another, we breathe in the light of God. But 24/7, we're breathed out into the world, right? We're scattered. And that's where everything happens, really. Our greatest asset is our community scattered throughout this region as agents of love, peace, and hope. That's why it's in our vision, because it's very intentional. We want to be the message. We want to be the logos, right? Wherever we are. And I think that also means it's empowering, because we don't have to do everything together. We don't have to do everything within these four walls. We don't have to do everything corporately. In fact, we can't, because we only have finite resources, right? So we have to make some decisions about what we do together. The left hand needs to know what the right hand's doing, and we have to be good stewards of our resources and not overcommit, not choke out the message with overactivity, right? As we were talking about earlier. But this out-breath is almost, the potential is almost infinite, right? Almost infinite. Today is Pentecost. Did anybody know that? It's Pentecost. So it's the 50 days after the Passover. It's a Hebrew festival, a Jewish festival. It's also the day that we celebrate when the church, the early followers, were filled with the Holy Spirit. Let's look at that. Look at that story. On the day of Pentecost, all the believers were meeting together in one place. Suddenly, it's a great story. That's a fantastic story. Suddenly, there was a sound from heaven like the roaring of a mighty windstorm. I've highlighted that word. It's the root word for spirit, for breath. Okay, in the ancients, for the ancients, breath and spirit are the same word. It's like our breath is the breath of God, and it filled the house where they were sitting. Then what looked like flames or tongues of fire appeared, glossa in the Greek, and settled on each of them. And everyone present was filled with the Holy Spirit, the pneuma, this wind, this breath. And they began speaking in other languages, other glossa, as the Holy Spirit gave them this ability. At that time, there were devout Jews from every nation, every ethnos, which we were talking about the other day, Revelation 7:9, Nikki was talking to us about it, that there's this image of the future of all these people around the throne of God. It's another dream, another story, and they're from every ethnos, every nation, and they're speaking in every tongue, every glossa. So we have a sort of an image here that's very similar to that. When they heard the loud noise, everyone came running, and they were bewildered to hear their own languages being spoken by the believers. So I don't know what you make of speaking in tongues. People have different perspectives on that. I have a pretty positive perspective on it, but for me personally. But it's clear that this wasn't gibberish. This is actual languages, because people are hearing their language spoken. They were completely amazed. How can this be? They exclaimed. These people are all from Galilee. What they mean by that is that they're kind of uneducated. So how come they can speak all these different languages? And yet we hear them speaking in our own native glossa languages. Here we are. Parthians, Medes, Elamites, people from Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, the province of Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and the areas of Libya around Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs, quite a few different ethnos there. And we all hear these people speaking in our own languages about the wonderful things God has done. They stood there amazed and perplexed. What can this mean? They asked each other. But others in the crowd ridiculed them, saying, they're just drunk, that's all. Now, I would, after a glass of wine, my French is way better than beforehand, right? But I don't suddenly become fluent in languages after a glass of wine. So I think the joke's on them. But what I think is happening here is that the writer of Acts is setting up one of the greatest comedic moments in the whole Bible. Because what happens next is Peter stepped forward with the 11 other disciples, other apostles, and shouted to the crowd, listen carefully, all of you, fellow Jews and residents of Jerusalem. Make no mistake about this. These people are not drunk, as some of you are assuming. 9 o'clock in the morning is much too early for that. Implication, if it was 6 o'clock in the evening, then maybe, but not at 9 o'clock in the morning. So finally, talk about the logos bearing fruit. You think of how intense and uptight Peter is. he finally gets a sense of humor. Okay, there is fruit of, a crop from the good soil. The point here being, in our history of Christianity, of followers of Jesus, there's this whole process of scattering happening all the time. You think about Abraham in there, like a journey, being sent out, doesn't really know where he's going. Think about the people of Israel wandering and being scattered. Think about going into Egypt and then coming out of Egypt. And think about the stories of in the Christian scriptures, like Jesus's family, and Jesus' whole ministry was a journey of moving around. The Apostle Paul goes on all these journeys. Just after this happened, so there's this great gathering, this sort of multi-ethnic gathering, where they're speaking all kinds of different tongues. And I would say Cedar Ridge is now speaking in tongues, right? We may not see it quite that way, but we've been singing in Portuguese and Spanish and Korean and a bit of English here and there as well, and mostly American though. That was a joke. Yeah, sorry. But this sort of gathering of the presence of the Spirit creates this cultural richness that then is dispersed out. And the dispersal actually that happens after this is not planned or premeditated. It comes through calamity. It comes through persecution. But there's this dynamism to what's going on. This seed is being spread out. And just like we are being spread out in all kinds of different ways. So if the band can come back up, we'll move on to communion. So we are the seed, I think. I think Jesus's point here is to receive the good news. And that's really his interpretation, right? His explanation of it. But the implication is, you can be the good news. If you receive it, you can be it. And if you can be the good news, that is what we're sharing. That's who we are, scattered into the whole world. And some of us will find ourselves in hard places, thorny places. We'll find ourselves in good places, productive places. And time will tell over. As we persevere, that second parable that Jesus shares, there will be a crop. We will produce fruit if we can remain faithful, if we can persevere. So let's just take a moment here to quieten our hearts as we come to communion. This is a reflective time that we always have. And we have gluten-free crackers and fruit juice at the front here and in the middle. Everybody is welcome to take those either at the table or take them back to our seats. But let's maybe right now, and as we go into this reflective moment, as the band sing with us, let's reflect on two things. One would be that we are incredibly loved. We're incredibly fortunate because, for whatever reason, we have opened our hearts to the presence of God. We're here right now because of that, right? And maybe we need to hear things differently, for sure, but we're actually probably more in the place of the disciples. We do see, we do hear, we do understand, and that's a really good thing. What if, with all that, we could see ourselves as the message? Not in an arrogant way, but the way we live, the way we embody this is the message. And we're all being called to different things out there in this scattered state we have 24/7. We're all called to different things. We all have different passions. We are in jobs where we're making a difference. We're working in at times really difficult situations, and the way we work and the way we persevere is what is the message. We are in families, in neighborhoods, in schools where we are the message. So let's, as we come to the table, let's invite God's Spirit in this in-breath moment right now to empower us so that we can breathe out the love of God, the Spirit of God into the world as we go. Lord Jesus, come, empower us. Here we are. Send us. Amen.